Welcome to Deep Dives into the Bible, where we take our time and go deeply into God's Word. I am Father Michael Nasser from St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We are here with members of our St. Nicholas family and happy you've joined us. Here's today's conversation. Spirit, one God, Amen. Illumine our hearts, O Master, who lovest mankind, the pure light of the divine knowledge, and open the eyes of our mind to the understanding of thy gospel teachings. Implant in us also the fear of thy blessed commandments, that trampling down all carnal desires, we may enter upon a spiritual manner of living, both thinking and doing such things as are pleasing unto thee. For thou art the illumination of our souls and bodies, O Christ our God, and to thee we ascribe glory, together with thy Father, who is from everlasting, and then all holy and good and life-giving Spirit, now and ever to the ages of ages.
Amen.
Amen. All right, I have been looking forward to looking forward to today's study for a long time, because in many ways this is a hinge piece. They're all critical pieces. We're not going to cut anything out of Matthew and say, well, we can get rid of that. But this is a hinge piece. By hinge, I want you to page ahead and look at 26, verse 1. Actually, 1 and 2. Somebody read that for us.
Now it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, that he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified."
All right, so then the rest of the gospel is going to be his arrest, all the things about the last half of what we call Holy Week. So going back to where we are today, chapter 25, and specifically the end of chapter 25, this is the end of his final great discourse. It's the end of a three-part teaching that all of them have things that are critical that we get out of each of them, but each of them provides a critical piece that if we don't read the others and don't read them in the context of the other two pieces, we miss out. And the great question I've left you with is cliffhanger, teaser for the last 2 weeks is, what is the oil? Because just to remind you, going back to the first section in Matthew, verses 1 through 13, we had the parable of the 10 virgins, the bridesmaids waiting for the groom to show up. And we were left with that question, were they being mean that they didn't share their oil? Because that's what it seemed like to us. Remember, we're never going to go with what it seems like. We're going to say, what is the text teaching us? So that what it might seem, if what seems is actually wrong, we want to be corrected. We want the scriptures to correct what we think it means or what it seems to mean. So before we get into the last section here, any parallels that we all caught, we didn't get a chance to spend too much time on this last time. Any parallels between the first part, a parable of the 10 virgins, and the second part, which we looked at last week, the parable of the talents? Any commonalities you see between these two parables, these two teachings?
There were some wise and some foolish.
Good. Yeah. Not, well, it's outlined that way for the first one, not outlined that way for the second one, but by the end of the story, obviously, we had 2 wise ones and 1 foolish one. Good. What else do they have in common? I think we made the point last week that in both stories, you have somebody expected at an arrival at an unknown time, both of whom arrive later than expected. And the expectation in both was, you be ready, even if it's unreasonable, according to the person waiting, that the person who gets to decide that is the one who's arriving. Okay?
And then there's a harshness for those who are not wise. They're both cast out.
Nice and loud, Kathy. There's no mics done that way. That's all right.
They're both cast out and dealt with very harshly.
Right. And what would you say is the basis of the fact that they're dealt with harshly? Why would a a good master. We'll assume that God is good if he's the master in both of these. Why is he still good and still harsh? Is he unfair?
You've said before he's just.
Yeah. So if the bridegroom is the groom and he gets to say, be ready whenever I show up, whatever you got to do, you can do it, but be ready. And if the master leaves and says, do some work, I want to come back and see what you've made, and he hasn't hindered them, I wouldn't say it's not unjust. I would say it's fair. Anybody disagree? Okay. Yeah.
No, they all have their chance to do the right thing
Right.
and make the right choices.
In the right time, before the arrival.
Right. That's important.
Right. So if you focus on the time before arrival, you do what you need to do, you're fine.
Can I interject the fact that it seems that in both instances, the ultimate reward for the good servants is to be invited in to be with the one who is either the master of the banquet or the one who is the bridegroom. And that stands even for us today.
Beautiful. Yep. Really important point. It's not just do what you've been asked to do and you'll get your pay and I'll send you home.
Yeah.
All right. I keep mentioning Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. You end up with all of it. You get it all. Any other parallels before we go on? Does the parable of the talents tell us anything about the oil? Since that was where we got hung up. What's the oil in the parable of the talents?
Investing with the bankers or increasing what he's been given.
Right. So what they've been given, they were given something, right? Given different amounts, 5, 2, and 1. Or sorry, what was it? 10, 5? No. Yeah, 5, 2, and 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're given something and they're expected to do something with it. And he's going to come back and want to see what they've done with it. So a little bit different than the oil. The oil was keep the lamp going. Whatever it takes, keep the lamp going. In the parable of the talents, it's increase. But I think in both, you can see where in a sense they're given. Now, whether the groom gave the virgins, the bridesmaids, the oil, either way, they had a place to get it, and it was their responsibility to get it. Right? Go to the dealers. There's a place to get what you need. Go get it. It wasn't like you're expected to get something that you don't have access to. All right, so we're seeing some of the similarities, some of the common themes, because that's going to really help us going into 25 to 31, this last section. Again, remember the verses and chapters at the later edition, but the text goes in the order that we have it. All right, so would somebody read for us verses 31 to 46 in chapter 25? Good, so Deacon, thank you.
Yes. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" And the king will answer and say to them, "Assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me." Then he will also say to those on the left hand, depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in, naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life.
Thank you. So, Deacon? All right. Look at the structure of it. How is it very different than the first two sections in Matthew 25? I'll give you a hint. The first two sections were parables.
This is truth. This is real.
Yeah. So he doesn't say, now I'm not going to speak to you in a parable.
I know like it is.
Right. Okay. Having told the parable, having told another parable, which we've seen, there's themes that continue. Then we go into this final section of the chapter, and it's not a parable. And that's how we know, by the way, that assuming there isn't a randomness to Matthew's gospel, we haven't seen it all yet. Those two are leading into this. Those two are going to inform the teaching that's not given in a parable. Right?
So would you consider it a prophecy?
Yeah, as long as we understand prophecy, for I think prophecy is more common. A lot of people misinterpret prophecy as telling the future. Like what people were saying 2 weeks ago, I don't know what's going to happen in the election. I'm not a prophet. As if it's like seeing the future. Prophecy sometimes includes that, but prophecy is always about whether or not there's a future prediction or telling of the future. It's always about how to change what's happening now. So the prophets came and they would forewarn the destruction of Israel. They'd say, however, if you want to avoid this, here's what you got to do. So prophecy is always a word of truth about a current action. It's not just, and that's where I think most people get really confused about Revelation. They take it as a prophecy in the sense of telling the future. And they try to interpret, what's he telling us about the future? Well, prophecy in Revelation is prophecy, it's biblical prophecy, meaning it tells you what to do now. It doesn't tell you that just for like, oh, by the way, here's some interesting things. It's not, you got Nostradamus and you got Revelation, in which one it's all about changing what we do now. Or encouraging us.
For a Christian, I think verse 41 is the most troubling in the whole Bible.
Verse 41.
He will say to those on the left hand, depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Alan. I have other ones that I find disturbing, but they're all in that same theme. Yeah, the stakes are big here. Right? And again, this is not a parable. This is a story. Not a story. This is a teaching. All right. So we're not going to say, who does this character represent? This is Jesus talking about a truth. Now, what's interesting is he says in verse 31, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, we've talked about this before. Son of Man is one of the Old Testament titles that Jesus applies to himself. But then he changes his description. Look in 34. What does your translation say?
The king?
The king. Right? So it's not as if there's a different person. There's a scene being drawn, being painted for us, right? And then the person who's already spoken is now going to speak again, only he's referred to differently. By the way, just as a little side note, the king is going to speak, and the first thing he's going to say as the king, at least in 34, is, "Come, O blessed of my father." So somehow in our understanding of Jesus and his relation to the Father, he's not just the son of the king, right? He's not the prince. Even though there is a king, the Father is the king, Jesus refers to himself also as the king. So they are distinct in person, but there's something that they share that both can be seen really having the same function. All right, so we know it's a teaching, it's not a parable. There is a parable-like description that gets applied to the picture he's painting. And what's the parable-like description? Early on.
The sheep and the goat.
Yeah. And what is he doing that he calls to mind sheep and goats?
The nations are gonna be gathered and then separated like a shepherd does.
Yeah. So he says all the nations are there, right? That's everybody. And he's going to separate them one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats.
Now, is there something there that we don't understand because we're not shepherds and goatherds?
I don't think so. What do you imagine he's doing? If you're that shepherd, what's your job? If you want to see them separated.
Safety.
I mean, just practically, what's he doing?
Putting sheep on one side.
And how does he know?
By looking at them.
Yeah. Okay. That's why I don't think it needs, sometimes we do need a little bit, like when he talks about being the door, like maybe we don't realize that the shepherd would lay in the gap in the fence, that he would be the door, things like that. I think this is one simply, even people like me, most of my experience of livestock is the children's farm, right? Petting zoo. I could, with some fear and trembling, separate sheep from goats. Right? It's like, okay, that one I know is a sheep. You go this way. Goats, you go that way.
Now, do sheep listen more than goats, or are they easier to?
They're more docile, and I don't know much about them. I could tell you that goats seem to be meaner. Not all the time, but from my petting zoo experience, I was happier with the sheep than I was with the goats.
I don't know if they're meaner, they're feistier.
Yeah.
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 Did you feed them?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about when we took our kids, you know.
Oh, we used
Yeah,
to do that here. And you'd have to do it like a gumball machine,
Uh-huh.
and you pay for the food and you keep your hands.
Uh-huh.
Well, we
And then they
did.
lick, it's gross.
Yeah.
It bothered me.
So I just,
Yeah, and I remember the goats fighting each other a little more than the sheep would. Sheep were a little nicer to each other.
And you have sheep and goats as a farmer, they produce different things. For instance, you don't shear a goat.
Right.
The wool comes from the sheep, and then the sheep is also a source of food, meat for sustenance. The goat is the source for milk and the dairy and the cheese and things of that nature. And it's also been my understanding, because my daughter has a little farm and she has sheep and goats. And the goats will eat just about anything. As a matter of fact, one of their delights is to take your old Christmas tree, throw it over the fence, and the goats will eat it because that's a snack for them. But the sheep have to be carefully watched because they're a cud-chewing animal, and they have to graze the grass and the easier things. And so there's a difference in the nature between a goat and a sheep by what they eat and what they produce.
Well,
So the separation is probably necessary so that you can obtain what you need from either of the species.
yeah, so my guess is at that time, this is probably shepherds may have had both, and at certain times you got to separate them for the reasons you're laying out.
There was well, maybe still is, if you can get it, a really good book. I don't remember the name of the author, but it was something like A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23.
Philip Keller.
There you go.
Ah,
That was really good.
what's it called? Do you remember?
A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23.
Oh, that's the title. Okay.
Yeah, Psalm
Interesting.
23.
That was very
A
good.
lot of insight about sheep. For instance, sheep will not drink from a moving stream because they cannot perceive the depth of it. And so it says, he leads me beside still waters, because sheep will drink from something they can see their reflection in. Because if a sheep were to fall into deep water with the wool, they would sink. And so he leads me beside still waters. Why? He's the good shepherd. He's making sure that I am nourished and hydrated.
Nice.
Just those kind of insights about being a shepherd.
Neat.
Okay, so,
I just
yeah,
Googled, I Googled this. There's more information on sheep and goats than I ever wanted to know, but it says, as I read that there are two things that jumped out at me. Sheep tend to be more cooperative and inclined to stay with the herd, while goats tend to be more independent. It seems to me that sheep tend to be dependent on the shepherd and more inclined to stay with him and near him. So
That's all good insight as we're going to see how this plays
And
out.
I encourage you all to Google
Voice.
sheep and goats.
Okay, so he's going to separate them. Oh, yeah.
So the sheep, according to what Sam just read, the sheep are more followers of Christ, and the goats are questioning, and they're not so sure of themselves to be a Christian, to be a
Yeah.
follower.
Yeah, and my guess is they would have understood, they would not have needed Google to figure out the difference in personality between sheep and goats. But I think, yeah, it is helpful seeing how this plays out, that sheep have qualities of the connection to the shepherd that the goats don't have. And we'll see how that plays out. But either way, however much that plays into it, he's going to separate them. And who they are, which one they are, is evident to the shepherd, right? May not have been evident to the sheep and the goats because they're all mixed up. They don't really maybe care if I'm with sheep or goats or vice versa. But when it's time for him to separate, he can see the difference, right? And as this is going to play out, you're going to see that both the sheep and the goats, or that's the parable, both the people that are represented as sheep, one group, and the other group, neither one understands why they're with one group and not the other. We'll see that that's an important part that plays out. So he separates them. Now he's got all the sheep on his right hand, he's got all the goats on the left. And the king will say to those at his right hand. So he's not talking to sheep, right? Remember that's the parable quality of this, but this is not a parable. He's saying that this separation is like a shepherd separating sheep from goats. But it's an actual separation. He's distinguishing one from the other. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, by the way, notice who starts the dialogue. It's the king. It's not them saying, why are we over here? I don't know, he separates, and now he's going to tell them why they are distinguished from each other. So he's talking to those at his right hand. Come, O blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Now, let's just stop there for a second. What about the previous two sections do we learn that helps us understand this? Who gets to go into the kingdom according to the first two parables?
But we're
Ones
prepared.
are ready.
The ones who are prepared.
Yeah.
Right? Ready according to what in each instance it took, no matter how difficult, challenging, practical, reasonable, according to the people in the story, but according to the master, the groom, in this case now the king, inherit the kingdom prepared for you in the foundation of the world. So they're being welcomed in. Now, why is it them? Now we're going to hear why. 4, I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Naked, you clothed me. Sick, and you visited me. In prison, you came to me. Did they do that to inherit the kingdom?
No. They just did it because they did it. I mean, it was natural to them to do it. Nobody had to tell them. They weren't expecting anything. in return. It was just something natural. They saw a need and they filled it.
Right. And how we know that is, then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, and etc. Right? So in other words, if they had done it for the reason, if our imagination, well, they did it because that's what it takes to get in, this story says, no, that doesn't work. That's not how it is. They were doing it. There was something about them in their sheepness, in their quality of who they were, that had them doing this, not knowing that it would be what would get them to inherit the kingdom. There's something in them that's doing this because whatever is in them that says this is what we choose to do. It's the right thing to do. So they ask, when did we see you? All these things. When did we see you sick? When did we visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. So surprise, surprise, they didn't know they were doing that to the king. They were doing it to somebody else. For whatever reason, they understood it was the right thing to do. And then surprise, surprise, by the way, that was me. Because you did it to me, welcome to the kingdom. And then the opposite. They'll say those in the left hand, depart from me, you cursed, the eternal fire prepared for the devil's angels. By the way, who is hell prepared for?
The devil.
Yes.
Yeah, not for goats, not for people who don't fulfill the commission they were given. One of the hardest thing I think for us to understand is, how does God, quote unquote, send people to hell? And I think one of the things we're going to learn through this is he doesn't.
Well, C.S. Lewis says it in such a way as it's, God doesn't send you to hell, you choose it.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's the sense that we're going to get here, is that, and the first clue is what we've already heard. Depart from me, you cursed, an eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Hell was not made for us. It's not like God said, all right, let me set up the good place and the bad place, and we'll see how you do. And if you do good, I'm sending the good place. Hell was for the devil, prepared for the devil and his angels, not for us. Now, that being said, do people choose it? Yes.
That's what C.S. Lewis also said famously, in the end, we will say to God, thy will be done, or we will hear him say to us, thy will be done.
Right.
Either we choose God and follow him, or we choose everything or anything other than God. And unfortunately, the alternative to being in the presence of God is in the absence of the presence of God, which can be described as hell.
Right. And I don't know if he got this from Eastern Christian patristics, but that's a theme that runs very long and deep in our tradition.
Yes.
We don't have a very wide or deep understanding of sort of God as the judge, and he's got these two possibilities, and you stand for the judge, and then you get judged. There is this idea of God giving us everything we need, saying, when I come back, I want you ready. I'm going to expect return on my investment, expect you ready with the oil, all these other things. And either we will have freely chosen to do that, or freely chosen not to have done that. And then, as you're saying, C.S. Lewis says, he respects our decision. Your will be done. Not that it was his will, not that's what he wanted, not that it's what his plan. The eternal fire was not prepared for us, but I would say in his love for us, he gives us the freedom to choose it, even if it's the last thing in the world he wants.
I think there's a Bible verse that says, oh goodness. I'm sorry. My brain does things.
If it comes back, tell us.
You can be in my club, okay?
I think we're all signing up for that one.
Missile
Father,
fire.
Father, were you saying that the sheep that he picked there at the beginning, he really had no idea that they were doing what they were doing to get into heaven? They were just doing it.
Yeah, we don't know why they were doing it. The story doesn't tell us. We know that it was the right thing to do,
Right.
right? We know that it was, in some sense, and this is where you got to use the parables to fill in the gaps and see the things that each one doesn't have, but you can see it clearly when you see them all together. There was an expectation they would have done that, right? If the expectation wasn't there, then they don't get rewarded for fulfilling it, and the others aren't punished for not fulfilling it. So how the expectation is there, this doesn't feel, and that's where we get the other two to help us. But it was clear that they didn't know that would be the result of those doing that thing because they're surprised. Lord, when did we see you? And do all those things. We didn't know we were doing that. Do you?
I have a different way of looking at it, so please correct
Yeah.
me where you see problems with it. But it's almost as if, and again, I'm gonna go back to living on earth as it is in heaven. If you're a sheep, you will see the world as, or you will act as if you were in heaven, loving your neighbor. Just as who you are. And if you're a goat, you will see the world differently.
Yeah.
And, but you will not live as if you were in heaven.
Right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, but I'd add one more sentence. People who feel like goats and act like goats can learn to be sheep. That's where parables don't always hold up when we sort of try to lock in the teaching into the story. In real life, goats don't turn into sheep. But there are goats that act like sheep, right?
Well, coming here, I come Schaefer, 32nd Street, and that's where Tassel's Farm is. It's the equine group where they rehabilitate horses. But there's a little goat, and I just saw him this morning, and he was standing there looking at the horses. He wants to be with them. You can tell, and so it was just a cute little goat. It was not me.
Very sheepy goat.
But the horses were ignoring him.
Oh,
Yeah, bad. He was just the cutest little guy, but he had good intentions. I just call it.
So do we know if we're sheep or goats?
Yeah.
Is the purpose of the story to know that we're sheep or goats? But I'll turn the question back. No. What's the point of the story?
To do what we are told to do.
Yeah, and not
be
because
rare,
we're going
not
to
because
see.
you're gonna see what that reward is, but because that's what is expected of us.
Yeah, and I would even say not just expected. Again, we've been looking at 25 with a very sort of closed look of these three sections. But 25 comes after chapters 1 through 24. And in 1 through 24, we're getting all of Jesus's teaching, his actions. We're looking at what does God look like when God can be seen in human form, acting and talking and interacting. And what we see is he looks like people who give food to the hungry, drink to the thirsty, physically and spiritually, right? Visits those. How many people does he sort of pull out of their isolation? We just had the story. It's actually from Luke, but on Sunday, the gospel was the woman who touches the fringe of his garment. And he says, "Who touched me?" And the disciples like, "Well, Master, you're crowded, all these people. What are you going to try to figure out?" Because she touched him, and in the middle of the crowd, she was all by herself. By the end of that very short interchange, he has pulled her out of isolation. Great is your faith. Your faith has made you well. So he visited her, even though she's the one that came up and touched him his garment. He visited her. He was with her. He was present with her. So Matthew 25 is going to show us, if we look at isolation, then you go, well, act like, do the right thing because it might be Jesus because you want to get in. But nothing in Matthew 1 through 24 told us that. All of what he said, taught, encouraged is love, right? Love people, love and give them what they need, especially the people who don't have anyone else to love them. Do what they need.
So when we're born, we are already the sheep. he gave us the nature to love and love one another and do for one another.
Yes.
It's along the road that maybe you become boatish, if that's a word.
Yes, that's what we Orthodox would say.
Most of the Western Christians would say that when mankind fell, his nature became fallen. And so we'd say, well, I'm only human. I'm mean, I'm crotchety, I'm just a human. We would say in our theology, well, in our anthropology, our understanding of who man is, what you just said. By our nature, we act like Christ. And in fact, whatever in the environment of being in a fallen world, Christ shows us and renews our humanity to say it doesn't matter what's going on around you. Even if it means they're going to kill you, you can maintain who you are in God. That's who you really are. You are a sheep. Yeah.
I remembered, and it goes back to the thought about being cast into hell.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere there's a Bible verse about why Jesus is tarrying. And he said, because he is not willing for any to perish. He wants everybody to become sheep.
Yeah.
And do the right thing.
Yeah. He wills that all men be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. That's his will. That's what he wants. And I think, again, with these 3 sections of Matthew, what we can say is the master is not coming back to catch the servant or the bridesmaids or the goats and go, gotcha. And you're bringing up this point from what we read is when the master delays, when the bridegroom comes late, when the king separates the sheep from the goats, we've already said that all those people should be ready when it's unreasonable. If you're ready for a longer time, but you're bringing up the reason why he's delayed, which we haven't addressed, so let's address it now. Why is he delayed? Why are we not getting the story to the very end of Jesus' teaching? Why does the bridegroom show up at midnight?
Well, there's another verse about he will come after the gospel is preached to everyone.
Yeah. And so he's waiting for...
To give more time for us to be ready.
Yeah. Yeah. He's giving us more time to do what he's already told us to do. I've been reading a story, not let's read it, actually listening, my first audiobook. My daughter read a book. She goes, "Oh, you'd really like this book." And I don't have time to read a book, so I got the audiobook from the library. And in the story, it's set like, I don't know, 1300s, Western Europe, England. And the stonemason can't find work, and his wife is pregnant, and she ends up having the baby in the middle of the forest in between 2 cities. He's trying to find work. They have no food. And then the wife dies in childbirth. And he doesn't know what to do. They've got a baby. They can't even feed themselves. And so he leaves, they bury the wife, and he leaves the baby on the grave because he can't take care of this child. And then they leave. And then it dawns on him, what did I do? Right? I can't leave a baby. I mean, even if I don't know what to feed, we've got to at least try. So they go back and they go searching, and they find the baby. But he needed time to get there. He needed time to get to the place where he thought this was a bad idea. And so I think it's easy in any of these to give the groom, the master, the king, and go, well, he's mean, he's impatient, he's harsh. But if we look at the stories as they're written, he's doing everything he can to give us every opportunity we can take advantage of to do what he's asked us to do.
And he gives us these laws for our good.
For our good, certainly. Who else's good is it for?
Everybody's.
Especially who? According to Matthew 25, 31 to 46. People in need.
People. Yeah.
All right. And it's hard for us who live, especially in this land of plenty, that we don't think about running out of food or running out of water or having no one to visit us. we have difficulties in life, but when you think about the people in these situations, our difficulties are just shadows of what people in these situations deal with. And he's saying, yes, for your sake, but those people are thirsty, right? Those people are hungry. Those people are lonely. Those people are sick. So it's love. He loves us, but he also loves them. And we're the ones that he's entrusted to do those things. Now, I'll use this moment to answer the question that you've all been burning to figure out. What's the oil? How do the people who are here at the return of the king, what do they need to have to present to the king?
Will you say that again?
So in each three of these sections, the theme was got some things to do, going away, coming back, be ready. In the first one, you better have enough oil. And it'll kind of mean like, well, how come they didn't share both? What's the oil? What did the sheep have? I'll say it a different way. What did the sheep have that the goats did not have?
Willingness to.
Empathy.
Love.
Empathy and love, and shown in what way?
And practical.
Yeah, I think it's a vision of heaven and what it should be and how it's acted out
Okay. And in heaven, how is it acted out?
in love.
In love, specifically shown in what way?
Toward others.
Which others?
Need. Those that need. We meet the need. We help to meet the need that they have.
Yeah. So when one person helps someone else with something that they cannot help themselves, and we can serve them by bringing that. Love is one word. The more specific word is?
Charity, charitable works.
Yeah, which we often call mercy.
Father, let me read real quick the study Bible.
You're gonna give it away, but go ahead, Alan.
Oh, all right. Well,
give it away. It's good.
The standard of judgment is uncalculated mercy toward the needy. The works produced by faith are emphasized, for a saving faith produces righteous works. It is possible to fool ourselves about whether we truly believe, but what we do so reflects our true inner state that we will need no other evidence before God's court. The needy are the intimate brethren of Christ. The least of these may refer primarily to Christian missionaries or the needy Christians, and by extension, all who suffer. Jesus identifies himself with the poor and the outcast and invites to brotherhood all who are kindled with love for others. These are crowned with grace.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. That's helpful. I want to pull out a couple of things from that. Why? Well, let's get that in a second. If mercy is what is needed, right? Mercy, giving drink to somebody who's thirsty, has no one else to give them drink. Why are they thirsty? Because no one else has given them anything yet. You have water, you give it to them. That's an act of mercy. Our word that we translate as almsgiving or works of mercy is the idea of giving something to somebody who has need of that thing, right? We're doing a winter coat drive because there are kids across the street that don't have winter coats. Can someone else, if Coley's hungry and I'm the one that needs to give him food because I'm the one with him, can I give Linda my mercy for Coley?
Then I would give it to him.
Right. In which case it's your mercy.
Well, I got it from you.
But you can't get from me If you give it to me, whose mercy is it? Is it any more my mercy?
You gave it to me,
How can I give you my mercy for him?
because we share.
This is the one thing we can't share.
I think you're getting political, Father.
No, I'm really not. If I'm merciful to Coley, I can be merciful to him. You can be merciful to him, right? But if I'm with him and I give him something, can I go, oh, I gave him $1. That was really from Linda, when it really wasn't from Linda. Now, if you give me $1 to say, give this to Coley, whose mercy is that? Yours. I can't give you my mercy for him.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna push back on that idea,
Okay.
because, it's very clear in scripture that we each have different gifts and roles. And, we can't tell the whatever body
And
part
foot,
is,
right.
yeah, it's better than the other body part.
Right.
And, say, somebody I know has a need for, English tutor, and, I stumble over my words and I
Okay.
confuse things and wouldn't be good at that at all. Should I provide my my horrible teaching skills to that person, or should I pay somebody who's really good at it to do it?
If you pay someone who's good at it, whose mercy is it?
It's yours. It's hers still because she
Right.
paid for it.
Right, you took care of it.
Okay,
So it's your mercy.
how is that
If
different
I'm an
from-
English tutor and you pay me to do something, not necessarily, I'm not gonna do it nicely, but do my job, but you're the one that says, hey, this person needs a tutor. Brother Michael, I'm gonna give you money, go tutor them. I got time here.
So how is that different from your example here?
My example is, if you do that, you pay me to tutor Coley. But you go, I want to give Barbara the credit for this one. I helped him out, but I want to give Barbara the credit. Can you do that? Can it be her act of mercy if you did it?
No, because I would have no part in it.
Right. And if you did, whose mercy is it?
Right.
Yours. So we can all be merciful, but you don't transfer the mercy. It's not like everybody has their own work to do.
Okay.
That's the key.
I say, go back to the first example. Was I merciful or were you merciful?
Did you give him money?
No, you gave it to me.
I gave it to you to give it to him.
Yeah,
So who's the merciful one?
you.
Yeah.
So, Father,
Meanwhile, you saw Kathy on the street and she was hungry and you gave her $1. You were merciful to her.
Okay.
Father,
Yeah.
Sorry, Holly, I wasn't merciful.
Don't worry. I'll
Father, so
forgive
in,
you.
What you're saying is if I can't do it, but I know somebody else who can, like if I don't know the answer to something, but I can say, Linda knows the answer to that. It's still mine because I'm getting the answer or I'm getting the solution to it.
I'm saying that if somebody's not involved in an act of mercy, just because you say they are doesn't make them involved. In that example, you're merciful by saying, hey, Linda, I can't really go. Can you go help Coley out? She's helping, you're helping.
Because I instigated, I started it.
Right.
Could it end up being both of theirs
Yes,
though?
absolutely. But if you come along and you go, oh, that was nice of me.
Right.
Oh, no. No.
so
There's
Father,
one who,
What? So what do you need to do? If you need some mercy, if you need to give some mercy, you don't get credit for theirs. What do you got to do?
I've got to show my own mercy.
Go buy for yourself.
It's got to be initiated from,
You
The
have to
source.
be involved.
So that's why they couldn't give oil to the foolish virgin.
Right. Because they had their own oil to give. It wasn't them being selfish. It's saying, you got to go get your own. Now, I'll give you the clue that all the wonderful Greek speakers, Maria was here, she would have picked this up.
Yeah, she's not good.
What's the word in Greek for mercy? I'm not going to spell it for you, but I'm going to say it. When we say, Lord, have mercy, what do we say?
Yeah.
It's eleison. Okay. So eleison is the grammatical form in that sentence. The mercy itself is eleon. What's the Greek word for oil? Eleon.
The different words, slightly different spelling, different verb, or different vowel combinations. In Greek, it's a lot easier to pick up than in English.
Huh. So, Father,
Yeah.
if we all gave money for the hurricane victims in North Carolina as a church, who is showing mercy?
Where'd that money come from?
From me and you and whoever gave it.
Yeah. One of the things we're talking about, or I wanted to be talking about coming up in the coming budget year, is we get during certain seasons lots of requests for collections. So in October, when nothing else is going on in the world, we collect for seminaries. We're going to do on Sunday. We collect for Special Olympics. That got postponed. We collect for, I forget, another one. And then when there's a hurricane, we collect for that. The problem in Lebanon, we collect for that. So what I'm going to suggest to the parish council is, let's budget in a couple of these and say to people, just keep giving to the church, and as much as we can, we're going to take from the church's funds and send to these appeals.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So but even though you didn't choose to give it, it's part of the budget. We all agree that's how we're going to do it. And so it still comes from us.
One other thing, I had a great quote here that I heard. It says, "The rich exist for the sake of the poor, and the poor exist for the salvation of the rich." I don't know.
My favorite quotes.
It's a great one. You
Which is totally different than we normally think of, right?
Mm-hmm.
I used to, before I started keeping granola bars in my glove box, I would pull off at Wealthy Street going to St. George going, oh, I hope there's not a homeless person there. Because then I'd be wondering, do I give him money? Is it gonna actually help? Is it gonna hurt him? How fast I'm gonna be driving by when I go by him? Like the other day, we had lunch down there for the Clergy Brotherhood, and now I keep the granola bars in there, and it was a matter of timing of getting that thing out the window because the light was green. But this idea of not seeing poor people as a hindrance to us, as a moment for just guilt and questioning, but seeing them as our gateway into the kingdom. Right? So we exist for them to help them out. They need food, they need water, they need a place to stay. They exist for us, for our salvation. Mm-hmm. Much more important even than food and water and clothing and shelter.
Well, that's what this whole verse is about, kind of.
Right.
I mean, I like that quote.
Yeah. So how do you see this teaching different than maybe you saw it an hour ago? What are you pulling out of it?
What teaching? What teaching?
The one that we did, this section, the whole section we're looking at.
I pull out of it the fact it's not just a black and white, cut and dried statement on judgment. It is an invitation to conduct ourselves with our true nature and in relationship to the king or the shepherd. And to encourage us along that line, we don't have to worry about the judgment if we are being true to what we have been gifted with as we share it with others, or as we understand that we need to be ready when the king or the bridegroom or the shepherd show up.
Yeah, beautiful. So the king is the one who identifies with these people to the point where when he says, when you did it to them, you did it to me. In other words, there's something about the king, there's something about God where he is so invested in the people that are hungry and thirsty and needy in whatever way, that he's saying to us, you're either with me or you're not. And how do I know if you're with me? You're with the people that are least of my brethren. He's not saying, did you go to church? Were you on time? Were you late? Did you pay your dues? He's not asking that. But I would say to people, if you want to become this person, if you want to become like God, you're going to have to do a lot of praying. I had a long discussion with a parishioner a couple of years ago because their opinion was if we're investing tens of thousands of dollars in iconography, when we could be feeding the poor with that money, aren't we going to be judged for it? My response was that money we invest in iconography, if we are seeing that with open eyes, with open hearts, we will get much more given to those in need because of the kingdom of God that people see, experience, touch, and are inspired by, and then go out and do what life in the kingdom inspires us to do.
Well, I was gonna say, you can do both,
Right. And one helps the other.
because
Do
we
we
still
look
need to
at-
be teaching the gospel
Right.
also.
What's that, Rob?
Do we look at feeding the hungry as an investment, as we see, as you had just mentioned, the icons as an investment?
I would say no. I think there's a truth to it. That's not why we do it, though. We do it because it brings honor and glory to God and his kingdom.
Right. So as
But I
a
don't
church,
see
we
that
should
as-
not look at it as an expense item on a income statement.
Well, accounting wise, you know me, you know better than me where that belongs. But do I see it spiritually that way? No. Again, I think we have some false distinctions between that if we invest in something earthly, that somehow it's not heavenly. Or if it's for a liturgical purpose, it's not to help the needy. I think those distinctions are easily overblown. Now, if all we're doing is taking care of ourselves and having the nice, beautiful church, and we come in and we go out and we act like goats, then yeah. But I think the parable is saying to us, that's not what he's calling us to. I love the story of, I think it was St. Lawrence. I could be wrong. He was a deacon and his bishop was arrested, and the person arresting him wanted what he kept calling the treasures of the church. He wanted the gold chalices and the crosses and the things that, and so he told the bishop, bring me the treasure of the church. And I forget what the bishop says, the deacon, but the deacon gets the message. And the deacon goes out and he finds all the people the church had been helping. The poor, the hungry, the widows, the orphans, and he takes them to the emperor. He goes, here they are. You want to see the treasure of the church? Here they are. Then they killed him because he didn't like that answer.
So how even God gave the instruction for the building of the temple or in the Old Testament, and it was very lavish.
Yep.
So he's not against us having a good church.
No, but according to Matthew 25, 31 to 46, why
Right.
should we have it?
You do both.
So we can know God, act like God, and not just among ourselves, but especially among those who are in need.
How do you determine what a real need is? I mean, I've had situations where driving around and I see someone on the corner and I have hasn't happened very often, but I've offered them food and I don't want food, I want money. Are we to determine what would be an appropriate response of discerning what?
Yeah, it's
the
tricky
need
these
is?
days because we live in a society where people can hide behind institutions and it's just a very complicated world. If we lived when Vicki and I went to Frankenmuth to visit friends the other day and we drove back the country roads, it's beautiful. And you're with all these little towns. In a lot of places, we know more about each other. Not that always is the case, but I think the scriptures would say, if you're in doubt, err on the side of mercy, not caution, right? In the sense that the question you're asking is the question that when the young man comes to Jesus, what are the greatest commandments? Love the Lord thy God and love your neighbor as yourself. And his response is, well, who's my neighbor? Maybe there's a way out of this, right?
Mhm.
And then he tells the parable of the Good Samaritan. So the Samaritan was not a neighbor to that man, because the Samaritan was, hands off to that man. The man wouldn't want a Samaritan, and yet the Samaritan was one showing mercy. So I think we err on the side, thank you, we should err on the side of mercy. And I think a granola bar is merciful, and maybe we're also contributing monetarily to homeless shelters and things like that, and going down and visiting people face to face, all those things together. I think it's those, I'm not really sure what to do. Do something. Better do something than nothing. Yeah. We are out of time, but thank you all for a great discussion. I might, if you remind me, share a couple of quotes on this I wanted to share today, but we'll do that next time, God willing.
Thank you,
All
Father.
right, blessed day, everybody.
Thanks,
Hey,
Father.
Do we have Bible study next week?